The string quartet was polishing off the safe kind of jazz you play for donors who like to pretend they still recognize standards. The lighting was expensive and flattering, and the caterers drifted like well-trained fish between round tables that all smelled faintly of money and perfume. I was there to stand beside my wife, smile, shake hands, and go home with my back straight and my name intact. Claire's hand was on the small of my back until the moment it mattered, and then it wasn't. She leaned in, breathing steady. The kind you use when you want a thing to land once and never be confused again. And she said, "Don't let them think we're a couple." 7 words. No tremor, no apology, no hedge. Just the clean slice of someone who rehearsed it in the mirror and liked how it felt in her mouth. I didn't correct her, didn't give the room any theater, didn't try to read a prayer into a cut. I let my hand fall, 1 inch that weighed as much as 10 years, and I stepped off the stage she built for herself. If she wanted me invisible, I would oblige, and I would do it well. I moved along the perimeter where the mirrors live, where the staff reloads their trays, where the security cameras see more truth than the toasts, and I watched the choreography. The laugh she used, polished, girlish, the old grad school trick for softening deadlines, bounced off the chandelier and came back thinner. I'd heard that laugh when we were broke, and she turned to a professor with a smile and a footnote. Back then it was a tool we both owned. Tonight it was a costume she wore for other men's budgets. Her boss approached with the gait of a man who believed the rug was woven for him, and I caught the flicker she wanted. Admiration first, recognition second, respect if it was easy. She gave him the good eyes, the tilted wrist on the stemware, the angle that photographs well. There's a difference between standing next to a man and standing on him. She picked. My anger didn't spike. It crystallized. Men like me learn to file anger into usable shapes. You can hit something with a hammer and feel better for a minute, or you can cut hinges and make a door that never swings the same way again. I stood at a high-top table against the wall, took water because open bars are bait, and I looked for the center of gravity in the room. It wasn't the stage, and it wasn't the CEO with the spray-tan smile. It was absent, the space people orbited without naming. I knew the name. The invitation had come 3 hours before the gala on a message with no emojis and a single line. "If you're still capable of a clean red, join me." Signed by a man who didn't sign much, Bernard Reed. Claire thought this night was about her ascent. I knew it was about the weather vane on the roof, the hand that turns it, the wind you can't see but always feel. I scanned for Reed the way a lineman scans for the hum before he touches the breaker. Calm, patient, no need to prove anything to anybody. No tie, water only. Corner table with a sight line that could cut a map in quarters. He wasn't there yet, or he was and didn't need to be seen. Claire's circle widened until it swallowed a junior partner, a photographer, and 2 donors who wore tuxedos like rented opinions. She introduced herself with our last name, but not the role that came with it. "I'm Claire Langford," she said, and the pause where my husband might live stayed empty. She glanced my way once, found only the shape of a man who no longer buffered her edges, and looked back to the light. I remembered the version of myself that would have tried to save her from herself with a stupid little joke or a hand on a shoulder. That man belonged to the last decade. This decade, I don't catch people when they jump. I measure where they land. When you strip a marriage down to brass tacks, you get 2 questions. Do you have my back in public? And do you tell me the truth in private? She answered the first with 7 words, and the second with the smile she sold retail. The quartet changed tunes, the room breathed, and the night shifted like a truck settling on new shocks. I felt the old rebuilt engine inside me. Patience, torque, miles. If a man's dignity is a house, you don't guard it by shouting from the porch. You change the locks, and you don't announce the locksmith. So I kept the perimeter, sipped the water, and waited for the reason I was there to take his seat. When Bernard arrived, the carpet didn't ripple and the lights didn't dim. A server simply adjusted her path to miss him, and 3 conversations ended faster than the participants knew why. He sat at the corner table without ceremony, eyes level, hands quiet. Power doesn't enter a room. It decides the room has finally come into focus. I set my glass down, left my post at the wall, and crossed the floor without haste or apology. No detour toward Claire, no need to signal anything to anyone. She had her stage. I had my work. "Evening," Bernard said when I reached him, voice like the last page of a contract. Short, precise, already binding. I nodded once, the old tradesman's greeting that says, "I showed up. I'm steady. Let's get to the point." He gestured at the chair across from him, and the choice I'd been making all night finished making itself. Claire wanted distance. I gave her more than space. I gave her perspective. Bernard Reed didn't need a tux or a spotlight to take the air out of a room. He wore a charcoal jacket that could have come off any rack. No tie, crisp shirt open at the collar, and the kind of stillness you only see in men who never waste a gesture. He sat where the geometry worked, slightly raised platform, back to a mirrored wall, view across every table worth scanning. No drink but water. If you want to know who matters, find the one who doesn't need an audience. That was Bernard. I took the chair across from him, steady as if it were already mine. No small talk. Men like us don't burn time proving we can. He studied me for maybe 3 seconds, and I could feel him adding weights and measures the way a farmer tests grain between his fingers. Then he gave the smallest nod, the kind that seals a deal before ink touches paper. From this table, the room rearranged itself. I watched the currents shift. Executives who thought they were magnets found themselves dragged a few degrees off course. Board members moved closer without knowing why. A director in a red blazer paused mid-sentence, eyes tilting toward our corner like iron to a hidden lodestone. Bernard said nothing. He didn't have to. Silence works like gravity when it comes from the right source. Claire hadn't noticed yet. She was still in the center, glowing, her laughter reaching for ceilings that weren't hers to touch. I watched her sell her charm in bulk, unaware the buyers had already left the stall. She floated from table to table with the polished ease of someone who believed attention was proof of relevance. But the orbit was shifting, and she wasn't in it. Bernard leaned in just enough to speak low. "You still see the lines." Not a question, an acknowledgement. 3 weeks earlier, I'd rebuilt a compliance framework for his people, stripped names and logos, and left only the bones that carried weight. He tested me tonight, sending me into a room where perception mattered more than titles. My answer was in the way I'd walked away from Claire's whisper and found his table without flinching. He read it and he approved. I gave a half smile. "Patterns don't lie." That was all I said. That was all I needed to say. Bernard's gaze swept the room once more, and then he relaxed. Not slouching, just settling, as if the room had finally reached the order he required. Around us, the company's leadership performed their dance, unaware that the axis had shifted to 2 men sitting at a corner table with no champagne in sight. Claire finally looked up across the ballroom. Her eyes landed on me, then widened when she saw who I was with. She tried to hold the smile she'd been practicing all night, but her mind couldn't keep pace with her mouth. For the first time that evening, her performance cracked. I didn't move, didn't wave, didn't smirk, didn't remind her I was still her husband. Men who know their worth don't audition for recognition. She'd wanted me invisible, and I'd given her exactly that, until the moment invisibility turned into gravity. The thing about board members is they don't rush. They drift. 1 minute they're pinned to their own circles, the next they're edging toward the pull that steadies the room. I didn't call them. Bernard didn't beckon. They simply began to migrate, like filings sliding toward a magnet no one admitted was there. The first to peel away was the red blazer director, a man who built his reputation balancing ledgers so precisely he made other accountants sweat. He approached from the left flank, hand loose on his glass, gaze measuring. Then came 2 members from governance, both women who'd seen enough collapses to know where to bet their seats. By the time the 3rd director shifted his chair just enough to face our platform, the orbit had visibly redrawn. Bernard remained still, like he was holding a string tied to the ceiling and everyone else was leaning toward it. Matt Coleman, the CEO, noticed last. He was mid-story, hand chopping the air in a rhythm designed to make the donors laugh, when his eyes tracked the flow. He saw the red blazer, then the governance pair, then the chair turned 30 degrees off its original axis. His smile faltered. He followed the line back to its source, our corner table. His gaze hit Bernard first, then slid to me. Recognition didn't land, but disquiet did. His lips stretched, tried to recover, but the laugh had already curdled. That kind of fracture is permanent in men like him. Once the performance slips, the audience never sees it the same. Across the ballroom, Claire caught it. She looked up from her circle of bright-eyed staffers, still mid-sentence, still laughing in that studied cadence. Her eyes found me at Bernard's side. For a moment, the smile held, a reflex, a stage mask. But then her brain caught up, parsed what it meant, and the smile stumbled. You could almost hear the gear grind. She had dismissed me, reduced me to background, and now the background had become the wall she couldn't climb. I didn't shift in my chair, didn't signal her. Men ruin their leverage by trying to underline it. I simply stayed put, silent, the weight of patience on my shoulders. Bernard lifted his glass of water and took a slow sip, as though he were confirming the room had settled into the order he required. Executives began excusing themselves from Claire's orbit with polite nods, the kind that signal duty done, interest over. Her circle shrank, not with a bang but a seep. She smiled harder, teeth showing, voice brighter, as if force could replace gravity. Couldn't. A gala is a market, and the market had just repriced her stock. Matt Coleman broke from his donors and headed our way, jacket buttoned, smile tight as a bandage. He leaned down to shake Bernard's hand, body language dipped in deference. His words were lost under the quartet strings, but I didn't need to hear them. You can read the hierarchy in the angle of a man's shoulders. Bernard gave him nothing more than a flat nod. Matt's eyes flicked to me again, searching, failing to place me, unsettled by the fact I didn't flinch or offer explanation. Claire's gaze was still locked on me, a smile frozen in place while her insides scrambled to rewrite the script. She had wanted distance. She had built a stage where I wasn't her husband but a prop to be hidden. Now the stage had tilted and she was sliding. That was the moment, the freeze and the drift. Her face trying to hold light, her eyes betraying the math. She was watching the orbit move away, powerless to drag it back. And I sat at the center of the gravity she couldn't touch. 3 weeks before that gala, I'd gotten a call from Sam Patel. Sam had the kind of resume that kept legal departments awake, risk officer for 3 collapses, cleanup man for 4. When Sam's name shows up on your phone, you don't check the time, you check your footing. He asked me to do what he called a clean room pass. No branding, no fluff, just rebuild the spine of a compliance system from the bones out. Neutral framework, airtight, the kind regulators can't poke holes through because there are no holes. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was precise, and precision has a scent. I coded Atlas_0423_V2B line by line, stitched controls into controls until the system looked like glass. Invisible until you tried to push through it. When I handed it back, Sam gave me no praise, just the quiet tone of a man ticking a box on a much bigger plan. That file was the reason Bernard Reed knew my name. Not Claire. Not her laughter or the way she angled stemware for attention. Me. My work. Men like Bernard don't care about charm. They care about architecture. They care about whether the walls stand when the wind shifts. So when he saw me at the gala and nodded me into his orbit, it wasn't social. It was confirmation. He'd already tested the frame I built. Tonight, he tested the man behind it. Back home after the gala, Claire kicked off her heels and launched into her debrief. Who she'd impressed, who had complimented her dress, what she thought her next title should be. I listened for a minute, then set my phone on the counter and pulled up Bernard Reed's profile. I didn't narrate, didn't make it a lecture. I just scrolled through articles, interviews, acquisitions, the shadow of a man who rarely appeared but always closed the file. When his name came up on the screen, Claire stopped mid-sentence. Her eyes narrowed. You know him? The words weren't curiosity. They were accusations, like I'd stolen a script she'd written for herself. I clicked open the Atlas build. He knows me, I said flatly. I walked her through the compliance skeleton and showed her the architecture. I didn't mention Sam's call. I didn't need to. The proof was in the work. Numbers don't lie. Frameworks don't flirt. Claire stood there barefoot, makeup cracked from the night, and for once she had no counterpunch, no charm to lean on, no laugh to hide behind. She just stared at the lines of code and the articles, the silent evidence of a world she hadn't mapped. Her stage lights flickered, and she found herself standing in the dark. "You didn't tell me," she finally said. I met her eyes. Didn't need to. There wasn't an argument after that. Just silence. She paced the kitchen once, picked up her clutch, set it back down. Every movement smaller than the last, like she was running out of places to stand. Competence leaves fingerprints, even without a name. She had tried to erase me with a whisper, but the room had already read what mattered. 2 days after the gala, a single-page memo landed in the boardroom. No fanfare, no leaks to the press, no throat-clearing conference call. Just one sheet of heavy stock paper with Bernard Reed's letterhead and 12 sentences cut to the bone. He was withdrawing. Effective immediately. The phrasing was surgical. Insufficient alignment with integrity, transparency, and strategic foresight. No emotion, no blame, no specifics. But in corporate rooms, words like those aren't critiques. They're indictments. They echo. The kind of echo that makes shareholders lean forward, attorneys sharpen pencils, and department heads start thinking about who they sit next to at lunch. When the memo hit inboxes, silence swept the upper floors. Phones stopped ringing. Slack threads stuttered. Even the assistants froze, as if the fluorescent lights had dimmed a shade. People looked up from screens and began asking the same question in low voices that carried further than they should. Who the hell is her husband? Because the audio had resurfaced. Security pulled the gala tapes for standard record-keeping, and tucked in the feed was Claire's whisper, clear as glass. Don't let them think we're a couple. Hi-fi, time-stamped, replayed. Nobody needed context. Words like that don't require interpretation. They just sit there, humming, an indictment in 7 syllables. Inside the firm, you could feel the temperature change. Board members whispered to each other, and directors who once nodded at Claire in corridors now let their eyes pass over her like she wasn't standing there. A whisper had turned into a case study. Executives repeated it at lunch like a punchline that tasted bitter. Don't let them think we're a couple. Everyone knew who them was, and everyone knew what it meant. That her instincts weren't aligned, that she had misread risk, misread relationships, misread the room. Bernard hadn't threatened anyone. He didn't need to. His withdrawal was enough. He pulled his money, his name, and his silence left a crater bigger than a scandal. A scandal can be fought with PR. Silence cannot. That afternoon, Claire came home tight-jawed, her blazer buttoned like armor. She dropped her bag on the counter harder than she needed to. You knew, she accused. I didn't answer right away. I was sharpening a chisel in the garage, the stone hissing with each pull. I let the sound fill the space until she realized I wasn't going to fill it with words for her. Then I wiped the blade clean and said, Bernard doesn't play games. He moves on. Her hands clenched. They're saying my name in the halls like it's poison. I met her eyes, steady. That's not my doing. That's yours. She wanted to fight, wanted me to shout so she could shout back and reclaim some ground. But anger, when it's clean, doesn't raise its voice. It just cuts. The truth was already in circulation. Claire had written her own verdict in a whisper she thought would vanish into the noise of a gala. She never understood that some words carry the weight of a signature. And now the room she wanted to own was erasing her, one polite silence at a time. Claire was summoned, not invited. That alone told the story. A calendar block marked Executive Conduct Review appeared on her Outlook. No subject line, no explanation, just a room number and 30 minutes carved out like a scalpel mark. The conference room sat at the center of the executive floor. Frosted glass walls, long ash table, chairs that looked soft but weren't. When she walked in, 3 people were waiting. The COO, a board liaison, and the head of HR. No coffee service, no water pitchers. Just silence and paper. The COO started. He didn't posture. He didn't raise his voice. Men like him are cut by subtraction, not volume. We've reviewed the Reed decision. We've also reviewed the gala footage. He clicked a remote. Her whisper played once, clean and damning. Don't let them think we're a couple. They let it hang in the air for a full 10 seconds. Claire shifted in her chair, legs crossed too tight, blazer pulled straight, trying to control a stage that no longer existed. HR spoke next, tone as flat as a balance sheet. "Who is he to you?" "My husband," Claire admitted. "You didn't disclose that relationship to the board." "I didn't think," she began. "Exactly." The liaison cut in. His eyes stayed on his notes. "You didn't think so. Not about risk. Not about perception. Not about alignment. You misread the room, and you misread the gravity of the moment." Claire's hands tightened on the table's edge. "I didn't know who Reed was." The COO shook his head once, like a man brushing sawdust from a jacket. "Ignorance is not a defense at this level. Initiative without awareness is liability." They didn't shout. They didn't accuse her of malice. They measured her, found her short, and set her aside. No firing, no drama, no headlines. Just a verdict spoken in the same tone you used to close a file drawer. Dismissed from future leadership consideration. That word, dismissed, hung heavier than termination. Fired employees get second acts. Dismissed ones fade, remembered only for the risk they represented. Claire walked out of the room with her heels striking like nails on a coffin. Nobody looked up when she passed through the bullpen. Screens glowed. Keyboards clicked. The building had already begun moving on without her. I packed like a man who had done the math. No wasted movement, no hesitation. Shirts folded into thirds, boots in a row, tools wrapped in canvas. Claire stood in the doorway, arms crossed, eyes darting between the suitcase and me, like if she stared hard enough, the logic might change. "You're really doing this over one sentence?" she asked, voice brittle. I zipped the side pocket shut. "No," I said. "I'm doing this because you meant it." She blinked, caught off guard by the simplicity. "It was a mistake. A slip." I looked up, steady. "No, Claire. It was a belief. You didn't want them thinking we were together unless it lifted you higher. You wanted distance when it mattered. You got it." Her face twisted, searching for leverage, some emotional crowbar to pry me back into place. But there was nothing left to wedge against. She tried again anyway. "After everything we've built? You'd throw it away." I closed the suitcase, pressed the latches down. "You threw it when you erased me in public. I'm just picking it up." She followed me down the hall, voice rising, but not with grief, with panic. "So you're just going to walk out? Just like that?" I set the suitcase by the door and straightened my jacket. "Not just like that, with intent." Her silence then wasn't surrender, it was realization. For the first time, she understood that my anger didn't shout. It didn't slam doors. It didn't throw glasses against walls. My anger walked out quietly, and it didn't come back. I stepped outside without ceremony. The night air was cold, clean, honest. I didn't slam the door. She'd wanted quiet at the gala. I gave her quiet at home. Later, when the house lights were still on, and I was 2 towns away in a rented apartment with a mattress on the floor, I sent one text. "You introduced yourself. No explanation. No lecture. Just a mirror held up to the words she'd chosen when she thought they cost nothing." The firm didn't cut Claire loose with headlines or handcuffs. That would have given her drama to rally around, a stage to reclaim sympathy. No, they did something colder. They erased her. It began with dashboards. Projects she had managed disappeared overnight. Reassigned again, logged into systems that no longer carried her credentials. She'd log in Monday morning to see a blank screen where her pipeline used to be. By Tuesday, her access card still opened the front door but not the executive suite. By Wednesday, the recurring meetings she'd built for herself evaporated from her calendar, canceled without explanation. She was still employed, still drawing a salary, but inside those walls she'd been air-gapped, cut off from current, sealed in her own silence. People passed her in hallways with polite nods, the kind reserved for visiting consultants. No one asked for her input. No one looped her in. She wasn't terminated. She was bypassed. An email arrived midweek from IT. Pending alignment with internal audit. Access suspended. corporate language for "you're no longer trusted." Another came from HR, rerouting her to professional development resources. Translation: a padded room in a building that had already moved on. The firm's slide deck on emerging leadership had once carried her headshot. One day she pulled it up on SharePoint and found it gone. No announcement, no explanation, just a clean omission. A name never spoken is more final than a name cursed. Mentors she used to corner for advice postponed lunches indefinitely. Her direct reports were reassigned. The phone on her desk rang only with misdials. It wasn't firing, it was forgetting. The river of business remembered its true course, and she was left standing on dry rocks wondering when the water had slipped away. I didn't gloat, didn't mention it when she came home later than usual. Heels clicking hard, face drawn from the effort of holding herself together in a building that had decided she didn't exist. She poured a glass of wine, didn't meet my eyes, and sat staring at her phone like it might light up with rescue. Didn't. Her punishment wasn't mine to deliver. The silence she'd crafted for me at the gala had simply come back louder, colder, absolute. It arrived on a Thursday morning, hand-delivered by an intern who didn't know what she carried. A thick gray envelope, heavier than standard stock. Her name inked on the front in deliberate block letters. No return address, no courier slip. Claire slid it open at her desk, hands tight on the blade. Inside lay a single photograph and a handwritten note. The photo was from the gala, high resolution, framed without mercy. In the foreground, Claire leaning in, lips parted mid-whisper. The words "don't let them think" were a couple frozen forever in her mouth. In the background, sharp and undeniable, my handshake with Bernard Reed. Two halves of one truth, her dismissal, my alignment. She flipped the photo over. On the back, ink pressed heavily into the paper. Trust isn't granted, it's noticed. Below it, another line. Character is a silent guest, and we remember how we're treated. No threats, no signature, just record keeping. She stared at it long enough for her pulse to quicken, long enough for her colleagues to notice the stillness at her desk. But no one asked. By then, questions about Claire had become bad form, the kind you didn't risk your name on. At home that evening, she laid the envelope on the counter between us like it was evidence. "Did you send this?" she demanded. "I didn't even glance at it." "Doesn't matter who sent it. The truth sends itself." Her jaw tightened. She wanted outrage, denial, some opening to fight against. I gave her none. I poured a glass of water, sat at the table, and let the silence settle like dust on stone. That photograph wasn't for me. It was for her. Proof that choices echo louder than intentions, that a whisper can redraw an entire life. She had wanted distance, and she got it, burned into paper, sealed in ink. I left the envelope where it lay. I didn't need to keep it. The record was already written, in the room, in the eyes of everyone who mattered. And that was the final weight. Not revenge, not fire, just permanence.
Subscribe and stay one step ahead of cheaters. And trust me, the next story makes this one look like a fairy tale.